It was one hell of a week in the Ukraine-Russian war. Two of the biggest strikes happened, one coming from Ukraine hitting Russian airfields, the other retaliation happening later on in the week with Russia retaliating on Kyiv. Here's what President Trump is now saying about this conflict.
Did the Ukraine drone strikes against the bombers inside Russia, the airfields, did that change your view at all of what Zelensky, the cards he has?
Well, they gave Putin a reason to go in and bomb the hell out of him last night. That's the thing I didn't like about it. When I saw it, I said, here we go. Now it's going to be a strike, Are
you worried that there might be a nuclear breakout with Russia-Ukraine? Are you worried that could...
I hope not. I think it's a war that would have never happened. If I were president, that wouldn't have happened. I certainly hope not.
Russia-Ukraine, where are you at today with the Senate sanction bills? There's been some reporting in the White Houses.
Well, I know the bill. I know the bill. What to see? I mean, if I think Russia will not be making a deal or stopping the bloodshed, 5 and 6 even. I've been saying 5 and 6, and now it's more. 1,000 a week, soldiers being killed and people being killed. Not just soldiers, people being killed, but largely soldiers being killed. I'd use it if it's necessary.
Wasn't that kind of casual? He also sounded very weary, right? I think he's realizing that he's coming to his wit's end as to what his charisma is capable of accomplishing. So he's resorting to his, tough talk that isn't as aggressive as it used to be. Danny, earlier on in the week, also was commenting on the Ukraine strike on Russia, and he explained how all of the hoopla and all the propaganda that was being put forth at first, because, originally Zelensky was claiming that they hit over 40 planes, but that ended up not being quite the number. It's more like 13, and some say as low as 10 planes. But here's Danny commenting on the whole unfolding of how it was being presented in the media.
Each one of those drones has a camera, and that camera records video, and that video is being used for this massive propaganda campaign. They seem to be crippling the flow of semi-trucks inside of Russia right now, because how is Russia supposed to trust semis that are driving on their roads, right?
Well, I'm sure that there's a lot of internal discussion going on, and they're trying to find out just how big is the scale of this. Were these the only ones? Are there more in there? It seems reasonable to suggest that this was only phase one, and that they would, if they're going to go to all that trouble, that there may well be phase two. But that, again, just shows you that no one is safe anywhere. Now, I will tell you, though, that while this is great video for the Ukraine side and is huge embarrassment for the Russians, it has damaged their bomber fleet, though apparently not as bad as what's being claimed by the Ukraine side. It hasn't done anything to change the front line dynamics, and the Russians are still continuing to move forth in the Sumy area, the Kharkiv area, Kupiansk, and then elsewhere on the eastern front, and that hasn't even slowed down yet. So I don't know that the Ukraine side can be too excited, because media victories don't equate to battlefield victories, and those dynamics are still in Russia's favor.
I thought that was so important that Danny pointed out that Ukraine isn't building up momentum here. That's not what happened with their strikes on the airfield. Actually, to the contrary, they overplayed their hand, saying that they were such a big accomplishment. Zelensky came out afterwards, we showed it on the show, how he was, with his chest out, saying how what an accomplishment it was. And Danny was giving the perspective that really it's not changing a thing. They are in the same place they still were. Yeah, they made some strikes, and yes, it was visually effective, but really on the ground it had nothing to do with making any change whatsoever. What I love about Deep Dive is we're able to bring some of the best minds and thoughts on this subject, and how we always have Colonel Doug Macgregor, how he brings the historical outlook to what is all going on, and it always changes the perspective when you look at it, when you take a step back and apply history. So here was Doug talking about the whole dynamic of what's unfolding at the moment.
We have a very distorted view of the past. I mean, every nation does. If you had lived through the Second World War inside the Soviet Union, you would have not viewed that war as some glorious manifestation of Soviet greatness. Tens of millions of human beings were being slaughtered on a daily basis. 1 million Soviet soldiers were executed by Stalin because they said we're not fighting the Germans. Nobody points that out. There are a lot of things that are wrong with the way all of us look at the Second World War. Eisenhower got it right. He said, we don't ever want to do this again. That was the intelligent observation. And therefore, he said, I'm not going to fight the Soviet Union. And they're not going to fight me, because we can avoid that. Right now, we need Trump to stand up and make the same point about Russia. We are not going to fight them, and they don't need to fight us, and we can avoid it. But he has been unwilling to say that. He needs to say that. That's a message everyone in Europe, as well as in Russia, needs to hear. But then there's the rest of it that is just ridiculous, that somehow or another there's anything left of Ukraine. I suppose we could move lots of air defense systems and station them around the cemeteries so that they can still have plenty of room and can bury more Ukrainian soldiers without interference. That's about it. That's the dumbest thing as I can imagine. There is not a shred of humanity right now in anybody who insists on killing more Ukrainians for nothing. And that's why the Ukrainian ground commander quit. He said, that's it, no more. How many dead does he have to amass on the battlefield in front of him before he says, this is ridiculous?
You know, any of you, and I think a lot of you have been watching Colonel Doug and how he's been transitioning over the course of time here, and he's pretty fed up. And if you saw that whole episode, you would have heard the disgust in his voice, and you'd understand how fed up he is, where Trump has now been leading us to, or maybe better yet, not leading us to. We also had Patrick Kennyson on, and he talked us through some of the transitions when Trump first came in and that where we are now, just months later, and what has occurred over that course of time. And it didn't take much time for things to drastically change.
Under Trump, the hope was when he came in with a lot of goodwill under him, like a magic carpet, okay? And it was that Trump was going to bring this war to an end, come to some kind of a decent relationship with a major superpower like Russia. And somehow, you know, this whole Zelensky roadshow is just going to have to be, this is the final season of Servant of the People. It's over, right? That was the hope, okay? He has extinguished and spent all of that goodwill in 4 months with no tangible results at all. And the problem is the U.S. can't shirk their duties as a world superpower. As the head of NATO, the U.S. cannot leave this to the devices of European smaller and lower and medium tier powers, because history has shown what happens when you do that. And unless the U.S. takes a decisive position with the other major superpowers to come to a stabilizing agreement, the potential for nefarious actors to fill the vacuum of power. And let me tell you, I do not see Trump as a strong leader right now. I see Donald Trump as very weak. Okay, very weak, without strategy, without any clear vision, no U.S. foreign policy, no grand strategy, nothing. It's just that you've got to bend to our will and do what we say. Otherwise, it's going to be trouble and I'm going to be upset. And if you don't submit to my will, that's not strategy. That's not policy. That's not foreign policy. So the U.S. needs to step up. If Trump can't do it intellectually, he's got to have a team around him that can pull that off. Not just this, they're balancing plates. They're balancing the Iran talks, plus the Israel-Gaza situation, plus Ukraine-Russia. So there's some big, important plates in the air right now, and they're very close to basically fumbling and dropping all of them.
You know, Patrick is voicing something that a lot of others are saying, that Trump actually doesn't have strategy. Jim Jatras was on the show earlier this week, and he explained that he thought that Trump is working and motivated by impulses rather than strategy, and how disastrous that is and how we're seeing played out like that. Professor John Mearsheimer was also on this week, and he mentioned how his position now is changing in his mind as to what the possibilities are. He's a pretty measured guy, if you guys have seen him much. So he's not one to jump to histrionics in any situation. He has a very calm and thoughtful approach to everything. But things, because of all that's unfolding, are changing in John Mearsheimer's mind.
I used to think that there was hardly any possibility that this war would escalate to the nuclear level. Once it was clear that the Russians were not going to be defeated in eastern Ukraine, I relaxed with regard to this whole issue of nuclear escalation. But as I watch this war unwind at this point in time, I'm getting increasingly nervous that at some point nuclear weapons might be used. The Russians are angry. They are awfully angry. And you have more and more operations like this and the Kursk offensive. the incentives for the Russians to escalate are very great. And the Russians might very well think about using a nuclear weapon, especially in Ukraine, because Ukraine doesn't have the capability to retaliate. I'm not saying that that's likely. All I'm saying is that we're marching forward here into a world where the Russians are getting increasingly angry with us. They're getting increasingly desperate about where this one is headed over the long term. And when that kind of thing happens, states take risks. They pursue risky policies. So we do not want to underestimate the extent to which we're playing with fire.
You can see as the week was unfolding, all our guests are painting a very bleak picture. I mean, it's a familiar theme that we're hearing over and over again about people that it's their jobs basically to understand, to interpret, to analyze. And it's all being painted in what's being laid out before us. Danny and I came across this as something that we've talked about, and our guests have talked about often, is the desperation that the Ukrainian army is in. I want to show you the most recent initiative that the Ukraine army has come up with building their army. This is the conscription officers, and that's like an Uber Eats delivery guy, and you can see him taking off his backpack because they ordered food from him, but not because they were hungry, not because they wanted food, because they want to build their army. And here you see them taking him away to join the army. That wasn't an isolated incident. We've shown you other clips over the course of time of different kidnappings, but the fact that they're luring them in, it's not just dark, it's sinister how they're tricking them into that they're doing their job, showing up, and this is what ends up happening. Now, let me ask you, what kind of soldier will this Uber Eats driver be? What ends up happening when he puts that uniform on? Is this really an effective way to build an army? What's the morale? You can only imagine what the attitude, and it's even not even a morale. But what happens once he's in there and there's others like him, and what will that do internally to their organization, to the army that they say they're trying to build? It's so very upsetting. I don't have to tell you how upsetting it is just watching this. It's horrific. It's demoralizing to us too, right? That we sit here and watch this unfold before our eyes, and here not being in Washington or in positions of power. Sometimes we feel like we're just, shouting to the skies with our fists in the air. Things must change. Do something. Do something. I saw something that I thought it gives me a little bit of hope in the sense that truth is being spoken to power. If you're familiar with Theo, he's a comedian, but he also has a YouTube channel, and he has some, just frivolous, fun conversations with people, but he also has some serious conversations. Well, this is one that just came out where he sat down with Vice President J.D. Vance.
It's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised, basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being televised. Sad, man. It feels like a massacre, and it feels like, I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you two. But I think where it gets scary is that we we're complicit in it because we help fund, military stuff. And that's where, as like a regular guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes and they're going towards this, but you can't do anything, you can talk, but it's like, you can't, I don't understand how it becomes tough for people. Sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, I think you're a great dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think do I think it's a genocide? No. And here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israelis are purposely trying to go in and murder every Palestinian. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they got hit hard, and I think they're trying to sort of destroy this terrorist organization, and war is hell, and that is true. I also think it's true, man. I mean, I've seen people on my side of the political aisle. I'm a Republican. You know that, but your audience may not. Who will see these videos of these innocent Palestinian kids and say, oh, well, they had it coming to them. No. If you have a soul, your heart should break when you see a little kid who's suffering, which is why we have the policy that we have, which is we're trying to eliminate the conflict and eliminate the source of the conflict so that we can actually bring some peace and some humanitarian assistance into people.
I play that for you, not because I like J.D. Vance's answer. I don't like his answer, and I don't buy it. I don't believe that they're doing everything they can to fix the situation, to help the situation. But I do play because I am glad that their feet are being held to the fire, that they're being held to account for what they're doing. And that's not going to stop, especially with alternative media. That's what we do here on the channel. And we're going to continue doing that. That's why we say we're unintimidated and uncompromised. And we want you to be unintimidated and uncompromised. And that's what we're here to do. So thank you for being here. Just wanted to fill you in on what's going on in the week. We got a great week coming up, as you know, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.